On today's episode of the Football Fellowship podcast, we'll be breaking down how Liverpool ran riot at Old Trafford in their huge 3-0 victory. We'll be looking at whether Arsenal were robbed or shot themselves in the foot in their 1-1 draw against Brighton, and answering the all-important question, will Haaland ever stop scoring? We'll be breaking down every Premier League game from this weekend's action, looking at all the stats and giving our opinion on every single one. And as always, make sure you stick around for the middle of the episode, the Football Fellowship quiz. Some rounds of Guess the Club for you to play along as well at home.
Welcome back, everyone, to Game Week 3 review of the Football Fellowship podcast. We're glad to have you with us. And Toby, it's good to have you back as well. It's not a double act with just one of us. And we're going to start off with the game at Old Trafford, which is Man United 0, Liverpool 3. And I guess I probably should go first because as a Liverpool fan, I would say I was optimistic, but I was also a little bit anxious just because of the fact that although Man United haven't started the season well with a 1-0 win at home against Fulham and then the 2-1 defeat to Brighton last weekend, I thought that after losing to Brighton there would be a reaction and that especially at Old Trafford, United would really be on the front foot and come at Liverpool. However, apart from a 10 to 15 minute spell at the beginning of the game, it appeared to be all Liverpool, and I couldn't quite believe how easy it was for us. I thought we were fantastic, but at the same time, it's hard to praise us while they're also saying how bad Man United were, because I think in both measures were equally true.
Yeah, and I think on those first two goals especially, it was a combination of exactly that, of United playing it out the back poorly and Liverpool pressing really, really well, and their midfield winning that ball back fairly high and then being able to make chances from there. And that's something that I think there have maybe been question marks of Liverpool over the last season or so, with your sort of midfield rebuild and in terms of who's going to play there, how is your midfield going to set up. And I think this season it's pretty clear that you are playing with a double pivot now of Gravenberch and McAllister, and the latter in Gravenberch in this game especially was exceptional.
Yeah, he really, really was. And I think he was actually playing a little bit further ahead of Alexis McAllister in this one. I think McAllister was actually playing a little bit deeper. And what Arne Slot was doing was pushing Gravenberch a little bit higher, just because he knows if he were to get the ball, that he could really drive out the United defence with the likes of Casemiro, Bruno and Kobbie Mainoo. All of the best work is going forward rather than defence. And in terms of tracking back, I don't think any of them really have the capabilities to outmuscle Gravenberch. And I think we saw it with the offside Trent Alexander-Arnold goal, where Mohamed Salah was offside in the build-up to it, where that was an early warning sign. I think that was roughly about 15 minutes into the game. And United were, okay, switch on now, because if you don't do it, then Liverpool will really capitalise. And the player of the first half for Man United in a negative sense was definitely Casemiro, losing the ball for the first goal, trying to pass it to Kobbie Mainoo and Gravenberch dispossessing him before Luis Diaz ends up just about heading it into the back of the net if it wasn't for a Szoboszlai clash. And in the second one where Casemiro is just outmuscled off the ball far too easy by Luis Diaz. Wonderful play by Mohamed Salah outside of his left foot. I think we're becoming a little bit desensitized to how world-class Mohamed Salah is. That was a truly wonderful piece of play to set up Luis Diaz for the second one as well. And I don't know, do you want to talk about Casemiro, Toby? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about him in the aftermath of the game. There's a lot of talk about him last season as well. He continues to divide opinion. A lot of it seems to be negative. Is there any redeeming, not qualities, but any redeeming factors from that game against Old Trafford that you thought, okay, maybe you can hang your hat on to the future, or is it one where Casemiro just looks a little bit done?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one when you have such a world-class player, or someone who at least was a world-class player in Casemiro. The amount of Champions Leagues he won, how good he was and how important he was in that Real Madrid side. And even in his first season at United, he was really, really good. He was exactly the sort of player they needed at that time, clearly carrying over his form from Real Madrid. But I think as we've seen, this season just gone and the season starting now, is unfortunately he's just not up to scratch at the moment. And I think when you can quite clearly see a player over a number of games not performing as well as they should be in a side that should be performing much better than they are in Man United, that you do have to change them around. And you luckily now they do seem to have brought in Ugarte, which is someone that I think we said that they do need at the start of the season, looking at last season. And I think it will now be a process of getting him into the side once his fitness is up and getting Casemiro out, because doesn't look like the player he was when he first signed for United. And these two mistakes in this game, I think they were two different mistakes, which I think highlights difficulties in his game in both aspects. In that first one, it was a poor pass out. It was a rushed pass straight into the path of Gravenberch, who was able to pick it up. And in that second one, it was too slow on the ball, not releasing it quick enough, and Diaz was able to come from behind and tackle him really easily. And unfortunately, when you do have someone in such an important role in that deep line midfield for Man United, it doesn't really matter what they did before. If they're not performing well, they've got to go, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I do worry if I was a United fan that, all the talk about Casemiro and he needs to be dropped, and I think rightly so. As you saw in the second half, Collier came on, and I don't think he did much better because I think Liverpool were really dominant and he was struggling to get his foot onto the ball. But the few touches he did have looked positive. But I do worry that Ugarte, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to come in and deliver straight away, especially since he didn't have the best at times at PSG. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't ideally what he wanted, and obviously got sold to United eventually. So yeah, we'll have to see how much pressure there is on Ugarte. But even though Casemiro got substituted at half-time, it was actually Kobe Mainoo who played in the sixth. And as we saw for Liverpool's third goal, it didn't really matter because of how well Liverpool were playing and how well their midfield was pressing, that they were going to be after the number 6 and dispossess him. And that's exactly what happened to the third goal. Kobe Mainoo gets dispossessed by Alexis McAllister. He plays the ball to Szoboszlai and then ends up being a 4v2. And that's one of the other problems I had with Man United was how high the fullbacks were in possession. And because if they were to lose it, as they did several times in that first half, then it leaves them 2, sometimes 3 versus 4 or 5 Liverpool attackers, and it just spells absolute trouble. But then, of course, Mohamed Salah makes it 3, and yeah, he is just simply a world-class player, and he seems to be having so much fun out there.
Yeah, it's really easy to just look at this game as how bad United were, and I think that really takes away from how good Liverpool were and how well they have started this season. And it just feels like that starting 11 you've got now, you've got a really solidified 11, and it's an 11 that I think gives you loads of options. It means you can really dominate in that midfield if Trent is starting to creep in. And you've got Szoboszlai, McAllister and Gravenberch, who I think can all play a number of roles, which is really, really good, because if one of them starts to bomb forward, another one can sit back. If you've got Szoboszlai drifting out wide, which he does like to do at times, it gives the freedom for Salah or Diaz to sort of drift inside. You've got Jota, who's able to play on the last man or drop in, and I think that's one thing that Liverpool have got really, really good this season, is that versatility in their attack. That when they win that ball high, it doesn't really matter who is in and around that box because it's quality all over the pitch. So yeah, especially in this game, I think it was clear to see that even under a new manager, under Slot, the quality is still there.
Yeah, and it's really encouraging because, it's no easy feat to replace Jurgen Klopp, but, it's a perfect start. 3 games, 3 wins, 3 clean sheets, and I don't think Man United in this game was the test that I think all Liverpool fans were expecting to see and also maybe hoping to see, just to see how well this side can do under the Arne Slot. When they have a team who are dominating possession, maybe coming at them with a wave of attack after attack, how well did they actually hold up? It didn't quite happen in this game, but there will definitely be games in the future where that will definitely be the case, and we'll have to see how they respond. But at the moment, seems all good for Liverpool, and going into the international break, nothing much that Liverpool fans can complain about, I don't think. Maybe apart from signing a number 6, which Liverpool fans will always try and complain about. But that aside, on the pitch, everything's good. For Man United, obviously, a lot of questions about Erik ten Hag. Ineos decided to keep him over the summer. 3 games, only 1 win, 2 losses. It's not looking great. Obviously, talks about him getting the sack of way too early onto the season. You just had a summer transfer window where you brought in a load of players in the positions that it seems like Man United needed anyway. But it does feel like this is the deciding season for Erik ten Hag, and more importantly than anything else, it's going to be the league position was decided. So he definitely needs to improve because, there's some worrying signs initially.
Yeah, and I think when the manager has been allowed to spend as freely as he has and spend as much as he has this season, I think they are going to be looking at that like, well, you've been given the money. If you don't deliver, then unfortunately it's not going to be the right person. But it's still exactly the same answer, I think, with Ten Hag. That yes, they've won 2 trophies in the last few years, and over long spells they can play well, and they've still got some really good moments in them. Like, I think in this game they created some good chances still. They had more possession of the ball. There's a few little positives you can take out. They do have some exciting players in Garnacho and Diallo, and Xerxes seems to fit into the side well. I'm just... I don't know what to think. I think Ten Hag will have till the end of the season unless things go really, really badly. But in the big games like this, that's really where I think problems can really stand out, and it can really affect their season. And a result like this at home, especially, it'll be interesting to see how they can bounce back.
Yeah, if anything, the international break has probably come at the perfect time, which gives Ten Hag and his coaching team some time to regroup, rethink their ideas, and go again in September as well. Because it looks like they're definitely going to need it going forward. But we'll move on then to Arsenal 1, Brighton and Hove Albion 1. And we will obviously come on to the big talking point in this game. I think we all know what we're talking about. But let's actually talk about the first half, because I thought in this one, I was quite interesting to see how Arsenal and Brighton played, especially Brighton, because yes, they spent a lot of money over the summer. They've recruited some players who are very exciting and look like they're going to have a bright future. New young manager Fabian Hillis has come in. And for me, this was Brighton's big test. Obviously, in the second half, we'll talk about it later. But in the first half, I thought that despite the fact that they went 1-0 down, and I think just because of Arsenal's brilliant quality more than anything else, I do think that they actually did all right in that first half. I mean, away against Arsenal in one of the biggest games you're going to have this season, one of the toughest games, I was actually quite impressed with Brighton. I thought that the four players linked up quite well. They weren't consistently under the cosh, even though Arsenal were dominating the game for the most part. But I was excited to see how Brighton were doing, and I thought they did all right for the first half.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the midfield, they played really well. Arsenal did not dominate the ball. We did not dominate the midfield area like we do sometimes. And a lot of the time, I don't think we really had our defensive line that high because Brighton had a decent amount of the ball. And as you said, we're linking up with their attacking play as well and playing their style of play and not going to the Emirates thinking, oh, we need to sit right back. And I think part of that is because they want to keep their game plan and they're confident that they can win, and rightly so, because when they play their football, they look really, really good. And also because Brighton do still, I think, have some defensive difficulties, I think, which have carried over from last season. And despite, how well Brighton, I think, played in the midfield and going forward, and they could have had a goal of their own, I think the way they played, and they did have a fairly high line, I think Arsenal did create a good few chances and maybe should have put them away a little better than they did in the first half. Saka had one, Odegaard had one, and Havertz was able to get his goal, which I think came from a defensive mistake from Dunk of not dealing with the ball when it came over, letting it bounce, and it was a really easy goal for Havertz to score. I think if Arsenal could have taken the chances, it could have been 2 or 3-0, but I think that would have been harsh on Brighton and how they were going forward as well, because they certainly could have had a goal of their own.
Yeah, I completely agree on the goal. I think when Lewis Dunk can't clear a header and Bukayo Saka ends up winning the 50-50, I think there's definitely something wrong. And if anything, I think they've left their defence a little bit too weak, and it's been more about the midfield and the forward line, which, to be fair, is the area that they needed the most reinforcements because of players leaving and players not quite working out. But then let's talk about what happened at the 49th minute, because in the first half, Declan Rice got a first yellow card for a challenge on, I think it was Joel Wertmann as well, for the first yellow card. And I think it's fair to say, and I don't think anyone will complain, that it was definitely a yellow card. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. The second one, though, Declan Rice ends up kicking the ball away, just a little tap, about 12 or 13 inches or so, and Joel Wertmann ends up clearing out Declan Rice. And the referee, you don't really know what the referee's going to do, but he decides to give Declan Rice a second yellow card for interfering with play and stopping and delaying a restart. So Toby, 2 questions. First of all, what was your initial reaction to seeing it live? And then secondly, now that all the fallout has happened, what's your reaction to it now?
Yeah, my initial reaction, I think, as an Arsenal fan, was this seems a bit ridiculous. I don't think it was anything awful, but I do have to say now I think it was probably the right decision from the ref, especially given the rules and how they have been emphasising that they are cutting down on sort of time wasting and stopping people taking things quickly, which I think is a really good thing, because it is incredibly frustrating if there's a chance of a quick counter-attack and the opposition team are illegally stopping that. And I think that was exactly what happened in this case. I think the argument of the ball still rolling is irrelevant. I think if the ball was still rolling or the free kick wasn't taken from where it should have been. That's up to the ref to stop that, not up to an opposition player. And it was a clear, deliberate kick from Declan Rice. It was a really, really silly thing to do. Hopefully something that Arteta is making it clear not to happen again. And unfortunately, I think in this case, he was rightfully given a second yellow. The only contentious point, I think, is that João Pedro should have also had a yellow card in the first half. The ball had clearly gone out of play for a throw-in, and he booted the ball away in almost no attempt to play or keep it in. It was very clear, I think, to just kick the ball away to stop Arsenal taking a quick throw-in. I think that probably should have been a yellow card, which is really frustrating in terms of consistency from the decisions made. But in terms of Declan Rice getting a second yellow, I think it was the right decision. And it lost us 2 points, I think, in that second half. So yeah, what do you make of it? What was your thinking now that everything's sort of calmed down?
So, complete honest opinion, when I saw it first time live, I thought, Declan Rice, what are you doing? That is yellow. And then I still think that, and I completely agree with you on every single point, which, just seems to be a narrative of this whole podcast. We just agree on everything. But I do think that, the consistency thing is an issue. I will say one thing though, because as we saw in last week's game, when Arsenal played Aston Villa, there was a moment, I think it was in the first half, where John McGinn just boots the ball at William Saliba, and then Ben White comes over and then boots the ball at John McGinn to get payback for his teammate. In that situation, the referee doesn't book either player, and he just calls him over, tells him, stop being idiots, get on with the game and play football. And I think we do also need to talk about maybe games as a spectacle, because we can nitpick however much we want and say, yes, Declan Rice should have been sent off, but it did ruin the game as a whole. And I do think that the way the referee handled it in Arsenal Aston Villa, yes, neither player were already on the yellow card, so maybe it's a slightly different situation. I do just think we need to take that into account as well, because I think there's a situation where you can call both players over and just go, because they had a bit of an argy-bargy before that whole incident happened, and they were both competing for the ball in the corner flag. I think there's an instance where you can go, right, lads, just knock it off, play football, and don't try and focus on taking the other player out. Just try and focus on winning the game for your team. So I think there's also that as well. But yeah, I completely agree on the João Pedro. That's the one that's very infuriating, because if you don't want the whole match, you don't see the João Pedro kicking the ball away, and it's blatant. It is so obvious that that's what he's doing. But if we get back to talking about the football, Brighton do obviously end up getting the goal, and as you would expect, Arsenal were defending very, very deep. Ends up being a goal for João Pedro, and I think it's one where it was early on after Arsenal got Declan Rice sent off, but I think it's one where actually it was quite preventable.
Yeah, it wasn't even a chance that came from us lacking Declan Rice being in the midfield. It came from the opposite side where he normally plays. It came straight from Lewis Dunk through into Minter, and it was our defence that looked really open, and there was far too much space between the fullback and the centre-back in Ben White and Saliba, which gave Minter a really, really easy run through, an easy goal. It was saved and they scored the rebound, but that chance shouldn't have even been there in the first place. It was just a lack of concentration, I think, on that part. And I think following that goal, Brighton had a good spell, and I think maybe that was because we were a man down and did have to sit back a lot more. And Brighton at the end had 22 shots, a lot of them from outside the box, with us really sitting back and just wanting to defend a point. And then we did have another in the same as the first half, as I said, we did have a number of good chances in the second half on the break as well, which again we could have taken and we probably should have taken, and still, despite being down to 10 men, potentially probably should have won that game. So I think it's easy to say that it was all because of the red card, but I think, Brighton's goal came from a lack of concentration defensively, didn't take our chances, and still could have won that game.
Yeah, you know what? I completely agree with the assessment. I think there were two opportunities where Havertz and Saka were counter-attacking Brighton, and both times that one of them could have put the ball in the back of the net. I think the first one, Havertz was running through, it got saved, and then Saka had a chance on the rebound as well. So, yeah, I completely agree. I think Arsenal could have gone on and won the game. And I do think the Brighton were susceptible, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward, because obviously Declan Rice is now going to be suspended for the next game after the international break, which is the North London derby. So that's going to be interesting to see how Arsenal are going to line up in the next game, and also how well they do. And speaking of Spurs, let's move on to the next game, which was Newcastle United 2, Tottenham Hotspur 1. And despite the fact that they actually lost, I think Spurs were the better team on the day. Definitely going forward, defensively, they've got some massive work to talk about. But going forward, I think Spurs absolutely dominated this game. They had 66% possession, 20 shots, 49 touches in the opposition box, and 58 final third entries, but an XG of only 1.26. I think it clearly highlighted that they were struggling to create and score chances in this game, but my God, they were dominant over Newcastle.
Yeah, and it was definitely, I think, caused by Newcastle sitting back. I mean, looking at the defensive lineup that Newcastle had, Livramento, Kraft, Byrne, and Kelly, it's not the strongest it could have been for Newcastle, and I think they were a bit concerned about that, and especially concerned about Tottenham being able to get in behind them. So they sat really deep themselves, forced them to a lot of shots outside the box, which is why we see that high shot volume and low expected goal number. And I think if just Tottenham had a couple more killer passes in them that really broke the lines, enabled them to get a few more chances in the box, then it could have really been Spurs' day. But ultimately it came down to Newcastle sitting back, a little bit of luck, and getting some really good quick opportunities on the break, that I think with Spurs pressing on, seeing that game being there to one, and that classic high line that we see from Spurs, Newcastle were able to get in behind and win the game ultimately on that.
Yeah, and it was really good clinical counter-attacking stuff from Newcastle at home, which you probably wouldn't expect. But as you said, the situation probably called for that, and it did, because they ended up getting the 3 points. So you can't really argue with that. And the first one was a goal by Harvey Barnes running down the left-hand side. They end up getting a throw-in, and I did feel like Spurs just switched off defensively completely. Lloyd Kelly just being too strong for James Maddison from a quick throw-in, and then the ball comes into the box, and there's just Harvey Barnes unmarked, and it just puts the ball into the back of the net, and you just think, after all the dominant possession and attacking play the Spurs had, all of a sudden Newcastle find themselves 1-0 up, and you just think to yourself, do you know what, fair play. I mean, you've got to take advantages of key moments, and Newcastle go into halftime 1-0 up, and they probably don't even expect it. But then eventually Spurs, the pressure does tell, but maybe ironically, it is the fact that they get the goal through a Dan Burn own goal rather than the Spurs attacker getting it, because it didn't actually look like they were ever going to break down Newcastle.
Yeah, it was such a frustrating own goal to watch. I can imagine a Newcastle fan seeing that would just have their head in their hands. It was a really bad spill, I think, from Pope. Did not get enough on it, or potentially even could have caught it. It wasn't a particularly ferocious shot from James Maddison. Fell into Brennan Johnson, whose attempt at, I don't know if it was a shot or a pullback into the goal, was saved well by Pope, and that flicked it off target. And then Byrne, trying to clear it, just got it all wrong. Should have been a fairly easy clearance, I think, just hooking it away almost. And it just went straight up into the roof of the net. So it was a really avoidable goal that Spurs scored in looking at it from Newcastle's defensive point of view. But I think when Spurs are dominating the ball that much and are creating a high number of chances, eventually one of them is going to crack, and it was that case. And Spurs probably would have seen it at that point, that this is their game to go on and win the way that they were dominating.
Yeah, and I really thought they were going to go on and do it, but it turned out to be the exact opposite, and Newcastle actually went 2-1 up, and it was Alexander Isak, and this time it was after Spurs were pressing Newcastle very high up, and James Maddison was trying to press on Joe Linton, but Joe Linton was frankly just far too strong for him, and at that point Maddison also picked up a yellow card, so he couldn't really afford to bring him down and risk getting a second yellow as well, and then Joe Linton ends up threading the pass, lovely pass, to Josh Murphy, and it's one where, because he played it in that left-hand channel of the Spurs' defence, I did think to myself, Spurs were in this game missing Mickey van de Ven. If that was Van de Ven on the left side of the defence, does Murphy actually break through and actually get into the Spurs penalty area? And I think to myself, probably not. It's maybe fine margins, and I'm probably over-analysing it a little bit, but in my head it just goes to show like how good Mickey van de Ven is, because I think he would have got there, and I think Murphy wouldn't have been able to cross it eventually to Alexander Isak, which was just a very easy tap in at the far post. So, yeah, very disappointing for Spurs. And now, 2 away games so far this season, to Leicester on the Monday Night Football in the first weekend, and now to Newcastle, only 1 point. It's not a great start to the season for Spurs, and a lot of familiar fragilities at the back that we saw last season as well.
Yeah, still question marks, I guess, over that high line, but as we said in this game, even though they didn't get 3 points, the opportunity to win the game potentially was there if they just had a little bit better in terms of chance creation, in terms of the quality of chance creation. And you can still see that they are one of the top sides. And this isn't a game against like a Leicester. I think that was a different result in only getting a point away at Leicester, newly promoted. Newcastle were a really good side, especially at home. And yeah, I wouldn't say it's panic stations at all for Spurs so far in this season. I think they've just got to carry on. And as you said, they haven't got Van de Ven. It's a huge player to miss. I think once Solanke sort of gets more cemented into the team, sort of finds his rhythm a bit more, I think they'll look a lot stronger. And yeah, it's a funny one because they did play well, even though they've come away with nothing, which is really frustrating for them.
Yeah, but I will just mention the fact that maybe it raises question marks about the recruitment over the summer, where these issues were highlighted, and we even talked about it on the first video back of this season, where we were talking about one transfer for every club, and we were saying that Spurs really need to find a backup to Mickey Van de Ven and Destiny Udogie, because you can't necessarily guarantee they're going to be fit for the entirety of the season. Obviously, they fixed the issue up front with Dominic Solanke, but yeah, one game all of a sudden, then they can see 2 goals, and yeah, with Europa League fixtures as well, it might be a difficult season ahead for Spurs, but it's still, again, very early on, so we'll wait and see. We move on then to Everton 2, Bournemouth 3. Right. I don't think anyone really expected what happened in this game. I mean, the unexpected part probably was Everton going 2-0 up, and in the 87th minute, they were still 2-0 up. And if you switched off there, you probably would have thought to yourself Everton would have gone on to win that game. But Everton 2, Bournemouth 3. Oh, God. I'm a bit lost for words, Toby, because this was such a shock. Because you don't normally associate this with a Sean Dyche and Everton side who, are meant to be really resolute defending and are meant to be keeping it tight, getting scrappy wins. And it looked like they were doing that against Bournemouth. And then what happened, in your words?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just one of those things that the manager can't do and you can't really coach, is just concentration. And that is exactly what Everton lost. All 3 goals, I think the way that they were scored, were just from people switching off just for a split second, losing their man, not being where they should be, allowing players to have too much space, making the wrong decision on whether to tackle them or whether to step back. And it was just easy for Bournemouth to come back into that game. They didn't really have to do much. A lot of deep crosses, balls across, and it's so frustrating for Everton because up to that point they had done everything perfectly. They've scored 2 well-worked goals. They had a number of chances as well. I think for the 85 minutes of that game, they deserved to win, and they deserved to win comfortably. I think it was a really good performance, and it just shows that you have to perform at the highest level in the Premier League all the way to the final whistle, and you have to stay focused. You can't just rest on your laurels of being 2-0 up, because every side has the quality to be able to step in and take advantage of that lack of concentration. So yeah, just really, really disappointing, and especially because it felt like Everton really needed this win too.
Yeah, well, I've got a stat for you here, which I saw online. The first 85 minutes of that game, Everton had 2 goals and 8 shots on target. Bournemouth in that same time had 0 goals and only 1 shot on target. But in the last final 12 minutes of the game, including the added time at the end, Everton had no goals and no shots on target. Bournemouth had 3 goals and 6 shots on target. So yeah, you can't really legislate for that as a manager. And you know what, if anyone, I feel really sorry for Sean Dyche, because he's worked his ass off during the week. He's got them coached really well. They end up 2-0 up and then to throw it away like that. And I do think Everton threw it away. I think even when that first goal goes in, I think they definitely have it in them to, make sure that they could stave that. Second one, again, inexcusable. And the third one is just, you got to hang your head in shame, really. But let's actually talk about the first 85 minutes when Everton, I think in my opinion, dominated the game and were actually the much better side, deserved all 3 points. And it first started off by a goal by someone very unexpected, Michael Keane.
Yeah, and someone who wouldn't normally be in the side if Brentford wasn't injured, and maybe somebody they missed as we go on to the Bournemouth goals in terms of organising their backline. Yeah, really decent goal, I think. A crossing from Harrison, brilliantly set down for him by Calvert-Lewin, and finished well by Michael Keane. And they had a number of those sorts of chances, I think, where they were getting nice early crosses in from sort of that right or left half space, looking for Calvert-Lewin, looking for anyone sort of further on at the back post if it was going over him. And Seamus Coleman had a really, really well-worked chance that he maybe should have scored in his left foot. And then the second from Dominic Calvert-Lewin was really good movement. And it was what we saw, I think, at the start of last season, where Everton were moving the ball really, really quickly, creating a lot of space for themselves in and around the sort of edge of the area. And it gave a lot of the players in this game, I think especially, time to take their time and pick out a final pass. And this was the case especially for Dominic Calvert-Lewin's second goal. I can't remember quite who passed it, but I think it was McNeil played it through. And you could tell the way that Everton had worked it from that left in, that he just had so much time to pick out the perfect through ball. Lovely finish from Calvert-Lewin. And at that point, it should have been job done. It should have been wrapped up. And then it was just one crossing from Bournemouth that set off the chain reaction to lose the game.
Yeah, it's honestly inexcusable at the Premier League level. I think for the first goal, I think Burnham loses his man, Otara, and then at the back post, Mikalenko completely switches off. And I don't want to be too harsh on Burnham because I think he's actually at fault again for the second goal because Lewis Cook's his man. As Bournemouth end up going on the attack, it's a 3v3 because for some reason Everton are attacking and trying to go and score another goal instead of containing what they have. It's very easy to say that in hindsight, but I still think that was the right thing to do at the time. But Lewis Cook is about 10 yards further deep than Burnham, and by the time he gets his head on the header for the second goal, he's about 10 yards ahead of Burnham. So from that one, I don't want to blame him. He's a young lad, he's learning his trade, and I think he's been one of Everton's best players in the first 3 games of the season. But for the first 2 goals, I thought he played a massive part and he could have really prevented them. And for the third goal, I think it's just a lack of accountability because Mikalenko ends up pressing to try and win the ball back, and then Gay needs to fill in the space that he's left behind at the left back position, and no one's been doing that. No one's communicating with each other. No one's yelling at them, telling them you have to get back in position. And I think lack of accountability, concentration, leadership, what is again all characteristics you don't associate with Everton and Sean Dyche's side. So yeah, bitterly disappointing. But if you're Bournemouth and you're right there, you absolutely take it.
Yeah, and I think that accountability thing is a massive part as well because you could see when that third goal went in, there wasn't one player, I don't think, screaming at someone or saying that's yours. They were all sort of looking at each other like nobody had the thought of should I have been there, who should have been there. It was just flat and just everyone looking at each other. And I think that was the same for all 3 goals. There was no blame almost from the Everton players to another player, which I think in this case was a bad thing. And I think on that first goal, somebody should have stepped up and said, right, this is not happening. We're not letting them come back. Get the shape, get what you need to be doing sorted. And it just didn't. It was even after that first goal, there was almost no reaction, no change for the second and third goal. They were really, really similar in terms of what went wrong. And that lack of reaction from the first goal or from the second goal is just gave Bournemouth the opportunity to go in. So, as you said, not something you expect from Everton, and I'm sure this week it will be drilled into them that it will not happen again from Dyche.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that Andoni Iraola even came out in his post-match interview and said, and I quote, Everton deserved to win. I think just shows the fact that they absolutely threw it away at the end. But, good start for Bournemouth to the season. 2 draws, 1 win, unbeaten in their first 3 games. It took Iraola 10 games to get his first win of last season, so that's much improved from their start to last year. And for Everton, similar start to last year, and the fact that they haven't won any of their games in August. And yeah, but this time I think it's a little bit more worrying in the fact that you probably expect them to do a bit better, and the fact that the goal difference is -8, and in the manner they conceded some of these goals, that's a little bit of a worry, but you still probably expect them to do absolutely fine. So we'll move on then to the 5th game, which was the Saturday night evening kickoff, which was West Ham United 1, Manchester City 3, and it's all about Erling Haaland. He is inevitable, isn't he?
Yeah, back-to-back hat-tricks, 7 goals in 3 games, and not captained by myself in fantasy football this week. What an idiot. Just ridiculous. I think he's got 70 goals in 69 Premier League games now, so averaging over a goal every game. And that's including games where he's not even playing the full 90 minutes sometimes, which is just unfair is the word really, isn't it, for every other team in the league.
Yeah, it really is. And if you're complaining about not even captaining him, Toby, he's not even in my team. I mean, what kind of idiot doesn't even have Erling Haaland in the FPL team? 50 million, too much? Nah, I think I'll go without him. Yeah, right. Well, I think we're all being put to show that, he is a quality player. But before he even takes his first goal, he actually has a chance to make a 1-0 even before that. A lovely Bernardo Silva chip from the edge of the box to him, and he's in acres of space in the 6-yard box, and he blazes it over with a header. And that's just an early warning sign for West Ham. But of course, he ends up making it 1-0 in the 10th minute. And yeah, this was just sloppy play by West Ham, who had a good introductory 4 to 5 minutes of the game. The Man City got a hold of the ball. They killed West Ham's momentum, and then they capitalised on the mistake. Emerson's pass to Paqueta was sloppy. Paqueta couldn't get there, and his touch was poor. Silva ends up picking it up, and it's just an easy run through and slide past Areola. But West Ham did actually get themselves back into the game in the 90 minutes through a Ruben Dias own goal.
Yeah, as we almost expect from West Ham. Maybe not so much this season under Lopetegui, but definitely last season under Moyes. That West Ham, when they break, they look like one of the best counter-attacking sides in the league, and they had the Bowen goal in this game. He did everything exactly right, even though there was nobody really in the box room to aim on. When he's there, just get that ball in the box. A Man City player may be forced to react, and it wasn't Diaz. He had to do something. I don't think he got a shout that he was able to do anything different, slid it into the net, and it gave West Ham an opportunity back in. And they had another similar counter-attack in the second half through Kudus, where I think he hit the post or the bar. And it just shows that, yes, we know Man City are going to dominate, but West Ham still have a lot in their locker, and especially on the break with those quick-thinking, fast players that they've got. So yeah, it was good play from Bowen, and to see West Ham having, I think, an out against Manchester City, because they're so good at closing the space down and preventing that, is a good sign that they've still got that in their arsenal, West Ham.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And similarly to West Ham and Brighton in the Arsenal game, I was looking at West Ham to be like, okay, what have you got? How good are you? You spent a lot of money over the summer. Now let's see. And they were, like you said, they had some bright moments. I think late on in the game, Somerville also hit the post. I think Edison got a lovely little fingertip to it, which ended up pushing it onto the post. Otherwise, it would have been, a great debut goal for Somerville. But I was just ended up being so impressed by how good Man City were. I completely forgot to look at West Ham, and I don't think you can really give Man City, enough flowers, because this is a side who have got multiple ways to break a side down. I mean, yes, Haaland ends up getting a hat-trick, all 3 goals, but if you think about that second goal that he scores in the 30th minute, it is lovely build-up play from the entire Man City team. 1 and 2 just around the edge of the box, from Grealish to Kevin De Bruyne to Bernardo Silva to Rico Lewis, who's coming into the Man City side, and then Haaland just to take that touch to set himself up, and then the different type of finish that he has. First one was just a placement. This one was just power and getting it over Areola. And you just think to yourself, how on earth are anyone going to stop him? And when you think about the fact that they've got Ilkay Gundogan, who returned off the bench as well. And then for the third one, a player who we've much maligned over the course of last season, Mateus Nunes, and they're getting an assist for Haaland. So, yeah, they look completely all-conquering, all indestructible, and they look like they're going to do it all over again.
Yeah, and I think that the touch for that second goal was the perfect striker touch, and it just shows that he knows exactly what he's going to do before the ball is even there. He's got it in his mind, he's going to touch, and he's just going to absolutely smash it. And the power that he gets, as long as it's on target, it's so difficult to save, because he's got that touch to set himself, and the speed in which he goes from setting the touch to taking the shot gives the absolutely no time for the keeper to react. And I think in a lot of those situations, other strikers are setting that ball, opening up their body, and taking their time to really pick out and fire that into the far corner. And I think that's probably what Areola's maybe thinking in the back of his head. But the way that just Haaland sets it and finishes it is just elite. It's so good, so clinical, and clinical again for that third goal, dinking over Areola. And it's exactly the same. He already knows what he's going to do seconds before anyone else can even react. And I think that's what really sets him apart is his IQ. I think is so incredibly underrated, and it's so easy to say that, oh, he's just a good finisher, oh, he gets in sort of the right positions and he's playing for Man City where he's going to get a lot of chances. But the way he reads the game at the moment is better than any striker in the world, and he makes so many of those so many of those goals for himself in opportunities where other strikers wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up perfectly. 7 goals in 3 games. Is anyone got any chance of getting relatively close to him in terms of golden boot? I don't think so. I think it's going to be another season where Haaland gets a golden boot and Man City, yeah, they look like the real deal yet again. But we'll have to wait and see if they are. Just like we'll have to wait and see if I'm the real deal in the quiz. Yes, it is time for the halftime quiz. Guess the club. And I'm quite optimistic because I'm leading at the moment, aren't I, Tobes?
Hey, you've had a flying start, mate. 4 points in one quiz round. That is Haaland-esque. That is a beautiful start for yourself. So it's currently 4 to Mev and 2 to me after 1 round 2 weeks ago.
Yes, it is. And I'm excited because I think I've got a good one for you. And I'm hoping you've got a good one for me because, yeah, I'm losing to you badly in fantasy football. So this is the only thing I can beat you in at the moment.
What did we do last time? I think I went first last time. So no, you went first last time actually, didn't you? I remember because I went second. So do you want to give me mine first?
Yes, you had to think about that, didn't you?
I did. I got so confused there.
Yeah, but no, I'm happy to give yours first. Yeah, so
Nice.
obviously 5 players, 5 hints to try and guess the club that they've all played for. The earlier you get it, the more points that you get, working your way from 5 all the way down to 1 for the last one. And obviously 0 if you don't get it whatsoever. But hopefully it won't be like that. So, Toby, you ready for yours?
I am indeed.
Okay, well, your first player for 5 points is Mikel Antonio.
Antonio. Oh, that's a tough one. So obviously West Ham. I'm pretty sure he played for Tooting and Mitcham as well. But I will be amazed if it's that. He's been around, hasn't he? Who was he at before West Ham? I actually don't think I know. I'm going to have to throw out a guess. I should know this. It's going to be a football league club. I actually can't think. Let's just throw out Bristol City.
No, it is not Bristol City. I couldn't believe you got the first 2. Who was it? Tooting and the other one?
Tooting and Mitcham. That's one team, I think, isn't it?
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was 2 different sides. Well, there you go. Well, it's not them.
Oh,
either.
I think I've got a guess now. One that actually works as well. Oh, that's so annoying. Oh well, we'll go on to the next player.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, second player for 4 points is Mason Holgate.
Okay, no, it's not who I was going to say then. That's fine. I was going to say Reading. I think Antonio was at Reading. But I don't know if Mason Holgate's been there. So he's obviously at Everton. He was at Sheffield United last season, I think, was Holgate. Or was that the other Everton defender? The other English Everton defender? Mason Holgate. Oh, I can picture him in another kit as well, but I just can't think. I'm torn between Sheffield, just saying Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday is actually in my head as well. Oh, this is shocking. Let's go for Sheffield Wednesday.
It is not Sheffield Wednesday, unfortunately.
Damn.
So, your third player for 3 points is Danny Ings.
Danny Ings. So you've got Burnley, Southampton, Liverpool, West Ham. And I think that's all I know. It's not going to be West Ham, because you wouldn't have given Antonio first. It could Southampton. Oh, it's between the 2. I need this for 3 as well. I need this. Come on. Burnley. Mason Holgate could have been at Burnley. Is Mason Holgate signed for Southampton now or something? Or have I just made that up? And Antonio could have been at Southampton. Let's go Southampton.
Oh, he's pulled it out of the bag. It is Southampton.
Thank God for that. Jesus.
It was Southampton. So, Mikel Antonio was there in the 2009-10 season on loan from Reading, which you did actually say.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Mason Holgate was there in the second half of the 23-24 season last year, where he made
That was
5
it.
appearances in the Championship.
Right. Yeah.
Because Sheffield United on Wednesday cancelled his loan because he was awful.
Nice.
Third, you got Danny Ings, who was obviously there on loan from Liverpool in 18-19, and then from there between 2019 and 2021, I think he ended up making 91 appearances and getting 41 goals. So not bad.
Very nice.
Yes, second would have been Sadio Mane, in the hope that you wouldn't have said Liverpool and then you would be like, no way. Because Mason Holgate came through the academy at Everton. And then first, obviously, would have been Toby Alderweireld, who I'm assuming you wouldn't have guessed Spurs, so...
Yeah, nice. That was a good list. I'm glad I got that for 3 because I would have been so annoyed if I would have said Burnley and then Mane came up next.
Yes, I was thinking like, oh, maybe he thought Holgate in Liverpool, Danny Ings, he went to Burnley. I thought maybe, but didn't quite get you.
Nice. Okay, we'll take that. 3 points. Much needed. Shall we move on to yours?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, your first player for 5 points is Josh King.
So, Josh King, what's he? Norwegian forward, I think he is.
Indeed. A really good throwback player.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't even say too far a throwback player. It was him and Callum Wilson are top for Bournemouth, which I know is a club. Yeah, I know he was at Cardiff as well. I don't really know where else he was, I'll be honest. So, I'll go with the obvious one to get it out of the way, in case it comes up later. And I'm going to say Bournemouth.
It is not Bournemouth, unfortunately.
Okay.
Your second player for 4 points is JJ Okocha.
JJ. Okay. So you think JJ Okocha, and you immediately think of the teams he played in Europe, and you just think Josh King has not played for any of those. And then you think Bolton. And now I can't get Bolton out of my head. So I'm going to say Bolton.
It is not Bolton, unfortunately, but
Okay.
Okocha did play for Bolton.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good guess. Your third player for 3 points is Hatem Ben Arfa.
Okay. Hatem Ben Arfa obviously played for Newcastle. He also played for PSG. I'm pretty sure he played for Marseille. JJ Okocha. So Josh King, I don't think it's going to be a UK-based team for Josh King. I think it's going to be a rogue one. That's why he's gone for 5 points. JJ Okocha, pretty sure was at PSG as well. I'm having a memory blank. Okay, let's go for PSG.
It is not PSG. You fell for the bait, Mev.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to do it.
No, it's fine.
Your fourth player for 2 points is Jared Bowen.
Jared Bowen. All I know is he's played for West Ham and Hull. Hull City. Sorry, many Hull fans. There's no way JJ Okocha played at Hull, so he must have played at West Ham. Is it West Ham?
No, it's not West Ham.
Right, okay.
Your final player, and you're definitely going to get this for a point, is Andy Robertson.
So it's Hull. What the hell? Hull?
It's Hull for a point, yeah.
What?
Yeah, so Josh King was there on a loan spell, I think,
When did
fairly early on in his career.
When did JJ Okocha play for Hull?
Yeah, he was there towards the end of his career. I think it was his third or second to last club, maybe. He had a little stint at Hull. And Hatem Ben Arfa exactly the same towards... I'm not sure if it was on loan from Newcastle, but it was, towards the end of his, I guess, career after Newcastle.
Wow.
He was at Hull too. And then, obviously Jared Bowen joined there from West Ham, which is a really weird one because I had in the back of my head, which is why I did Hull, that JJ Okocha played for Hull because I thought, that's interesting. And I completely forgot that Jared Bowen played for them, so I didn't even know what was meant to be the easier one. But I knew you would know that. And then, yeah, Andy Robertson, obviously, there before
Oh,
Liverpool too. So, yeah, the 1 point there. But
wow.
you definitely had that on the 2-pointer. But it's 50-50 decision, I guess, wasn't it? And
Yeah, I just thought there's no way JJ Carter's played for Hull City. No offense, Hull City fans. But I just thought surely not.
yeah,
Um,
had some
fair
good
enough.
streets will never forget players in a culture and Ben Arfa.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably past their best, but still, you should probably take that if you're a Hull City fan now.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, fair play. So what are the scores now then?
5 apiece. So that has tied it all up.
Okay, I was clearly too nice to you. I'll have to go harder next week then.
Yeah, no, I'll go a little bit. That's what we always do, just back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. But let's get back to the football because we've got 5 more games to get through. Starting off with Brentford 3, Southampton 1. And this turned out to be a pretty good game for Brentford, who were very dominant in this game, getting 3 goals in it, and Mbeumo with a double. And one where Southampton were very, very poor on the day.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was similar to the United Liverpool game, really, that I think Southampton playing it out from the back, they didn't do it well. I think they really do need to improve in that instance if they're going to in this season, especially we saw it with Burnley last season that as over the course of the season they did need to adapt how they were playing out the back to make it effective. And I think that was countered by how good Brentford were on the press, and it was how they pressed that really, really won it for them. And they completely suffocated, I think, the centre-backs when we saw Mbeumo and Sharda sort of coming in and Wissa coming in ahead of them, that they had no out a lot of the time. And that's how Brentford were able to create so many chances in this game. It's just suffocating Southampton and playing it out from the back. And it really, really worked. And especially worked in this case for Mbeumo, who was on fire.
Yeah, 3 games into the Premier League season, 3 goals for him. Wissa not too far behind, 2 goals for him and 1 assist so far this season. And despite the fact that Ivan Toney's gone to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabian side Al Ahly, they've still got Thiago to come back in December as well. So going forward, Brentford look like they're going to be a really, really good team. But actually quite impressed with, like you said, off the ball, the press. I mean, every time Southampton tried to pass it out, either to the centre-backs or the full-backs or the midfielders, there was a Brentford man within 3 yards and they were aggressive. They weren't just there for the sake of it. They were going there to win the ball. And Southampton really, really struggled. And I think Thomas Frank came out in his post-match interview and he said, in his opinion, Brentford are one of the best pressing sides in the league. And based on what I've seen in the first 3 games of the season, maybe not last week against Liverpool, but Liverpool are in a whole level, different level of opposition. But I think in the first 2 games, in the first game at home and this one now against Southampton, I've been really, really impressed with them, and I really like to look at them going forward. And it's one where a lot of people might have had them near the relegation zone. I think if they can keep Mbeumo and Wissa fit up front, then they're going to cause a lot of sides a lot of trouble. But it was actually one of the midfielders, Damsgaard, who ended up dispossessing Howard Bellis for the first goal, and then it was Matthias Jensen who ended up setting up Mbeumo for the second one. But I thought, yeah, Brentford were really, really good, and it's nice to see a side who playing one way just to stay in the Premier League, then under the same manager reinvent themselves to be a bit more progressive and it working, and you can see that the stages and the levels that they're going to go through.
Yeah, I think the way that they're playing and the form at the moment that they're playing under was reminiscent of their first season in the Prem when they were able to finish in the top half, and it was a lot of confidence, a lot of pressing, and Brentford had a really good chance before they got their first goal, which I think perfectly summed up how they play under Thomas Frank. It was a long ball over from, I think it was from the left back, sort of curling in. Wissa dropped in as the striker, picked up that loose ball, instantly played it out wide, and Brentford were just able to move so quickly from back to front, but so accurately as well, without too much risk really involved. And they created a good opportunity. They weren't able to finish it, but it was, I think from that moment onwards, you could just really see how Brentford were playing, and a lot of that press, I think, has not only come from how Brentford want to play and how well they played, but also reading their opposition in Southampton, that they knew that Southampton, when they attack, they're not super quick with moving the ball forward. They are a team who like to have high possession. They like to work it up the pitch and then sort of work it around that 18-yard box and keep possession high. So I think they knew that if they were pressing high, there wasn't really too much risk of Southampton countering them or playing it around them quickly, and that Southampton want to be a side that dominate the ball, play it slowly, and then snap and play at their own pace when they want to, as opposed to being pressured into it. So again, as you said, Mev, I think it just showed how well set up Brentford can be when they're playing their best. And last season, I think almost restricting how they play in terms of their press and style of play made them a lot worse, and then it made them have to regress defensively, where when they play with freedom, they just look like a completely different side to what we saw last season.
Yeah, and actually something that Southampton may be able to learn something from, because I've been a bit harsh in my assessment of Southampton in the first 2 games, and I understand that, but I want to be clear. I think they do have players who could actually do well in the Premier League, and they are able to survive and thrive, if anything, but not the way that they're currently set up and currently playing, because there was a couple of times in that first half, and I specifically went back and watched all of the build-up from this game. Aaron Ramsdale on a couple of occasions goes long with the ball, and then he doesn't. And I'm trying to think to myself, because obviously Southampton are trying to build from the back. That's what Russell Martin wants his teams to do. So clearly, launching the ball long isn't part of their plan, but there's nothing wrong with doing it every now and then, because if the opposition, in this case Brentford, aren't sure if you're going to build it from the back or go long, then regardless of which way you do it, they're always going to be in the back foot, and that's going to buy you a couple of seconds. And a couple of seconds is all you need as a defender or one of the forward players winning the ball and being able to get your head up and make a decisive pass or play. But in this case, because you knew every single time Southampton were going to play the ball from the back, there was no risk to Brentford of pressing high, because they didn't have to worry about the ball going long. And even if the ball did go long, they had Ethan Pinnock, Christoph Ayer, and Nathan Collins as well, all at the back, all defenders who are very good at winning headers against the likes of Adam Armstrong and Ben Burton Diaz. So there was really no attacking threat from Southampton in that build-up phase. So what my issue is that I think Southampton have left themselves a little bit short, because they have no plan B. And even if you look at the likes of Nottingham Forest, who have Chris Wood up front, yes, he probably doesn't fit in with how most people would want their side to play. But if you think about the players in and around him, he's a perfect foil for them, in the fact that you got Callum Hudson-Odoi, Anthony Elanga, Elliot Anderson, Morgan Gibbs-White. You've got attacking and flair players behind someone who's able to hold the ball up if you do need to go long. And Southampton have now set the stall up, so they have to play this way, because they've got no plan B going forward, because Adam Armstrong and Ben Diaz are definitely not two strikers who do that. Maybe Carlos Alcaraz could have done that, but he's obviously left the club now as well. So, yeah, Southampton have put all their eggs in this one basket, and so it's either got to come off, because if it doesn't, they can find themselves in a situation where they're cut off from the rest of the table by come maybe November.
Yeah, and I think with the way that they play, when it works, it really works, like we saw against Newcastle. I know they did lose that game 1-0, and Newcastle were down to 10 men, but you could see the game plan was there. They were sticking to it. They were playing well, and they created a number of chances for themselves. Whereas this game, when it goes wrong, it does go really wrong. It is almost that high risk, high reward football, playing out from the back, trying to take your time with the ball and make opportunities at your pace. And it's difficult when you're trying to do that as a side, as one of the weakest sides in the league on paper as well. And yeah, I thought going into the season Southampton would be good, and I think they would probably be better than they have been so far. But I still think they can get it right, and I think maybe I am clinging to that Newcastle game a little bit, but I was so impressed by them then that I think just a few tweaks that they can be okay. But in this game, yeah, I think you've summed it up really well. They were really poor.
Yeah, and the last point I'll make is obviously they had 63% possession in this game, but possession doesn't matter if you're ineffective in both boxes. So what are Southampton focusing on? Are they really good at keeping the ball out of the net? No. Are they really good at scoring those goals? No. So they're good in the middle third, but ineffective in both boxes. That's probably the one area of the pitch that you'd rather not take if you can mean you have proficiency in one of the other boxes. So yeah, lots to work on for Southampton. Obviously, yes, fairly on 3 games into the season, I would like to see Russell Martin adapt to style of play a little bit, just to see the Premier League, and then maybe just get the confidence of the players up, because the last thing you want is to get into bad form really early on, and then for the players to think that they're not good enough to be at this level anyway, and then then it's a downward spiral, and then you can't get yourself out of it. But yeah, lots to work on for Southampton. Break comes at a good time for them, and Brentford, a really good start to the season. 2 wins at home, and looking forward, they look really good. Which then brings on to the next game, which is Leicester City 1, Aston Villa 2, a Midland derby of sorts. And yeah, I thought this was a really good game, and one that Aston Villa edged out just at the end.
Yeah, and in this game, I think it started with Aston Villa on the front foot, and they created a number of good chances for themselves. I think Rodgers, again, in this game, looked so good and is looking like one of the bargains of the decade. Just the way they've been able to pick him up, slot him in the number 10, and he looks so, so good. And the way he carries the ball forward is really nice to watch. And those early chances coming to Ollie Watkins, which is something I just want to touch on before we sort of say how I think well Aston Villa played in this game and that they do still look good this season. And it just seems like Watkins, I know it's only 3 games in, looks like a slightly different player. Doesn't seem to have that confidence at the moment. And there was a few interesting stats that are sort of taken from this season so far. He's had an XG of 1.58 so far, 0 goals scored, and 4 big chances missed. And I think a lot of that as well is coming from his shooting frequency is really down this season. At the moment, he's on 1.3 shots per game. Last season, he was on 2.9. And to compare that this season, 3 games in, Isak, similar team, sitting on 2.7, and Nicholas Jackson as well with Chelsea sitting on 2.0. So a real drop from him from last season and to the other strikers in the league around him. And I think that's also been reflected by his playing time. 63 minutes on average over the 3 games this season, whereas last season he had 87 average minutes per game. So they were sticking him in the game, even if he wasn't playing particularly well, trusting him that he was going to come up clutch. And this season at the moment, it seems like it's a change, coming off around the hour mark in all 3 games, and John Duran coming on to be the super sub at the moment. So I think once Watkins gets his first goal, he'll be a lot more confident and we'll see him really shine again. But it is a little bit worrying that if that goal doesn't come in the next 2-3 games, he might not have the incredible season again that he did last year.
Yeah, I can understand your not pessimism, but just concerns around Ollie Watkins and the number of chances that he's getting. I would probably have a slightly more optimistic view just because I think, he did go away with England. He had no preseason. And the fact that just because John Duran has been coming up and putting pressure on him, 2 goals in 3 games, I think 6 of his 7 goals have come as a substitute. I do still think that Ollie Watkins does so much for the team off the ball that Unai Emery trusts him completely and he's willing to start him no matter what. So clearly by the fact that in the preseason and he wasn't willing to integrate him, he just wanted to go straight into the team. I think Unai Emery has a massive amount of trust in him. I do agree though. I do think that just watching him, the attack and the chances that he's getting do look harder. They look like they're coming less frequently, and you got the stats to back it up. I do wonder how much they're missing Douglas Luiz in that perspective, because obviously they haven't struggled for goals this season so far. They've scored a decent amount in the first 3 games, and it looks like that there's going to be more of a complete emphasis on the whole team pitching in. Obviously, Onana gets the first goal in this game from a set piece, and John Duran gets the second one. So they can't be completely reliant on Ollie Watkins as they were last year, because he did get the majority of their goals, and every game it was Watkins goal, the next game it was Watkins goal and assist, and then there's 2 goals for Watkins. So I think it is a positive, if anything, for the fact that they're winning games of football without him scoring. But I do agree, if they're to be competing for getting into the Champions League again this season, maybe going far in the Champions League as well, he needs to be scoring and being a talisman for them as well, because at some point things will drop off for Villa as a whole. And in that time, you will need a player to produce in moments. And obviously, as a forward player, regardless of how well everyone else is doing, he is their star man, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about Douglas Luiz. And I think we saw that so much last season, and probably why Watkins got a lot of assists as well last season is those long balls over the top from Douglas Luiz that we see Watkins either chase on and go one-on-one with the keeper, or stretch the play, get the midfield pushing up with him and sort of turn and lay it back, or take a shot that's saved and then a late run from a midfielder is the one scoring. So yeah, and I think exactly what you said. I think Ollie Watkins' all-round play is still really good, and that's why I haven't mentioned it, because there hasn't really been, I don't think, much change. I just think in terms of maybe how Villa are playing is slightly different, and he's just needing a bit of time to adapt to that. And as you said, it can be a good thing for Villa that they're not so reliant on him. I just think because of how good Watkins was last season, I really want to see him get that first goal and have another good season, because he's such an exciting player to watch, and one that I think is such a player that fitted Villa last season so well. So hopefully we can see that. But as you said, yeah, Villa are still playing well, getting results, and seeing other goal scorers.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, it's Amadou Onana, the new signing from Everton, who's got his second goal of the season already, and this time again from a set piece. And set pieces have become so important in the last few years, especially for the top sides, which is a characteristic you didn't see previously. And this one, I thought it was such a well worked one. A quick free kick from Euro Tillemans. He ends up passing it to Jacob Ramsey, who his touch while on the run, dribbling with the ball, getting it far enough away from any Leicester defenders, but so close enough that he's able to get fully get his foot around the ball to put a decent ball into the box, and then Onana on the stretch to go 1-0 up. And then every time Aston Villa scores a set piece, it goes to the set piece coach. I don't know his name. He's got lovely hair, but he fully deserves the credit because the amount of set pieces Aston Villa scoring, like we said, just another way for them to get goals and get wins. And I think set pieces are really important for Aston Villa, and Amadou Onana looks like a player who can really be a crucial player for them in terms of that regard. And then obviously in the second half, they end up making it 2-1, and this time it was a lovely pass from open play from Luca Dean, who ends up putting it to John Duran. Lovely header towards the back post, nothing Anderson can do about it. But for Leicester, they did have some positives. Buonanotte getting the goal in the 73rd minute from a volley at the back post, and despite losing the game to Aston Villa, they did have some bright moments, and really thought to yourself they could really hurt Villa in the attack.
Yeah, and they had the Vardy goal disallowed as well, and it seems like going forward they still are able to create a lot. I think looking at Fatawu as well on the right wing, and Vardy still seeming to be doing the business at his age. They look okay, and it was some good moments from Leicester. One thing I noticed that is just completely random is Mavididi and his sort of drop in minutes for Leicester. I'm not too sure if he was injured and maybe over the summer or something, but last season I think he played almost every game for Leicester, and he got nearly 20 goals and assists in the league, and this season seems to have sort of fallen out of the side and is now just being a sub, which is a shame because he looked quite bright when he came on in this game, and it sort of reminded me of the player that he was last year. But yeah, I guess that shows, I think, that Leicester are playing pretty well if someone like Mavididi isn't getting all the minutes. They had that good point against Spurs, able to get a goal in this game against a really good Villa side. So yeah, it was a good performance from them, I would say. It looks okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think in the early spots of the season, as a newly promoted fan, you probably just want to make sure that you're not getting dropped 3 and 4-0. You want to make sure that you're scoring some goals and you're keeping yourselves in games. And I think Leicester fans can probably take a lot of positivity from the first 3 games and go, do you know what? We're not going to be not in a relegation zone, but we're going to be competitive. And I think that's all you can really ask for a newly promoted side, despite the fact that Leicester, a few years ago, were probably had their expectations set a bit higher. But we know the situation they're in now. So to give Villa a really good game, I think is one where they can be positive going forward. But then we'll move on to Chelsea 1, Crystal Palace 1. And from talking about them first for 2 weeks in a row, I actually had Chelsea winning this game quite comfortably, but it turns out it didn't quite work out like that, and Crystal Palace ended up giving Chelsea a really good game.
Yeah, especially as Palace's form hasn't been amazing at the start of this season. And yeah, Chelsea, I think, got off to a really flying start in the first half, created a number of chances, and it was a number of chances that they weren't able to score. I think Madueke had a couple good chances in the first half. Jackson had a couple in the second half. An XG of nearly 2.5 by the end of the game, with Henderson preventing 1.8 XG post-shot. So, yeah, good performance from the Crystal Palace keeper, but Chelsea needed to be a lot more clinical, which is almost the opposite of what we were saying last week against Wolves, where their volume of chances wasn't exceptional. Their XG wasn't ridiculously high for winning 6-2, and they just seemed to score everything they shot. Whereas in this game, it felt like almost the opposite, that they just weren't able to put the ball in the back of the net after doing everything going forward really well.
Yeah, because I was talking about it last week, and I think their XG against Wolves was somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5, despite the fact that they scored 6 goals. You probably expect it to be 3 and above, maybe closer to 4. But in this game where they have an XG of 2.4, like you said, and then they only get 1 goal, I think it really highlights to me the fact that they're going to have results like this where they win really well because they actually play a very attacking style of football, which creates a lot of chances. But they've actually got a lot of young players in the forward areas who are still learning their trade. And, Noni Madueke is doing well getting himself into the England squad for the upcoming Nation League games. Nicolas Jackson is hit and miss. He gets goals against, like he did today against against Crystal Palace, and like he did against Wolves. But again, he will sometimes have games where he's not that great against Man City in the first game of the season, and then you've got Neto, Cole Palmer. They're all extremely talented players, but still very, very young. So it's one where you can see the positivities, and I think Chelsea should absolutely take the positivities, considering all the negative talk around in the season and the transfers. But now the football started, you can start to see that, Maresca did say at the end of the game that this is not the Chelsea side of a few years ago that won the Champions League, which is really disheartening to hear, I'm assuming, if you're a Chelsea fan. But I think he's right in his assessment. But it's a very young squad with a lot of promise, and not only just the forward players. If you think about the defence as well, Wesley Fofana staying fit so far, touch wood. Levi Colwill doing really, really well, getting himself called up to the England squad. Gusto, Cucurella having resurgence. I think there's a lot to be positive about if you're a Chelsea fan. So despite the fact that, yes, they're at home, they probably should have won the game against Crystal Palace, I think going into international break, things are looking on the up.
Yeah, and it's realistic, I think, of Maresca to say that. I do worry though with, I know there's no expectation of the quality of the players they have, and it is at the moment more about their potential, I think it's fair to say. But I do think with the amount of money they've spent, with the size of the squad, with the changes they're consistently making at Chelsea, whether that's the squad, whether that's personnel, whether that's the manager, that there is expectation for them to continue to improve. And I think that is the main thing, is just whilst they are in this rebuild, is that they do need to continuously improve. They need to keep playing better every week, and also picking up more points in sort of 8 to 10 game windows than they did in the last. And they played well. They definitely are playing better than they did sort of in the start and midpoint of last season. But it's just, to drop 2 points at home to Palace, I think is really disappointing, because they should have won this game. And the way that they sort of conceded is frustrating as well, because it was a really good finish from Eze from sort of a half chance, I guess, which I think makes it a little bit more frustrating, because it probably underlines that they did dominate this game and that they probably should have won it. But as you were saying, their quality is really good, and I think that's just a little part of their game that they need to work on in terms of being more clinical. So definitely not a big sort of disappointing draw, this one.
Yeah, and on the other hand, for Crystal Palace, what an important point it was, because there was a chance for a moment where it looked like they wouldn't get no points from the first 3 games. After everyone was talking about Oliver Glasner and the incredible end of the season they had, the transfer window would just kind of probably taken momentum out of the team and out of the fan base as a whole in terms of positivity. But it's so important to not go into that international break with 0 points, and to at least get one, despite how you get the result, despite the fact that it was, Eze with a moment of brilliance, and we know he's got that in him. So it's so important Crystal Palace keep fit. And of course, like you mentioned already, Henderson in goal, really keeping Crystal Palace in the game against Chelsea, because if it wasn't for him, I mean, he made a fantastic save from Nicholas Jackson right at the end, which ends up hitting back onto Jackson and ends up being a goal kick. But you could see how much that meant to him, because, a point, and just to keep them out of the relegation zone going into national break, make sure they're into it. And, there's still a lot of positives. I think Decore, when he came onto the pitch, for Will Hughes, who maybe was a bit fortunate not to get himself a second yellow in this game, but Decore as a destructive midfielder player alongside an Adam Morton, which one we haven't actually seen a combination so too much in Morton's time at Crystal Palace, because that looks like it could be one where Decore being the destructive player, getting the ball and just passing it on to better players, and Morton maybe being a bit more expressive and going forward a little bit more, like we saw for the Crystal Palace goal. He ends up driving and committing Chelsea players into make a tackle. He ducks and dives away from them, and he's able to pass it to Decore. He has the shot, ball falls in, there's a strike. But I think definitely a positive result for Crystal Palace, considering their very poor record against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. So one they will absolutely take.
Yeah, summed it up really well. It's a good point for them to have in terms of confidence as well, because it's not a sort of scraping a draw and feeling like they should get it. They will feel like they've really, really earned that, and an away game at Chelsea is never easy. So, it's a good positive for them to take and for them to build on.
Yep, absolutely. And then we'll move on to Nottingham Forest 1, Wolverhampton Wanderers 1. And Nottingham Forest, 3 games into the new season, unbeaten in the league so far. For a side, again, a bit like Brentford, who we had in and around the relegation zone. It's been a really good start to the season for them, epitomised by the fact that, they've got a goal scoring forward in Chris Wood.
Yeah, and this was a very Chris Wood goal, this one. It was a deep corner into the back post, and he had so much to do still. The way the sort of ball was delivered, he had to put a lot of power in to be able to get that back across the keeper at the far post, and it was an exceptional header and a really good goal. And as you said earlier, I think you summed it up really well when you were talking about Southampton, that Nottingham Forest are able to play with that more traditional striker, that target man, someone who's not going to sort of break the lines and get past the last line of defence, because you've got that on the wings and potentially even in the number 10 with Morgan Gibbs-White. So they've got a really good attacking system that seems to play well together, and especially at home, as we saw last season, Nottingham Forest seem to be confident and play their style of football and be a lot more expressive than I think when we see them away and they sit back and just purely try and counter and play long ball. And I think in this game, Forest again played well. They've had a nice run of fixtures to start the season, but they're using them really, really well to get that confidence high nice and early.
Yeah, they really do. And I think they'll cause a lot of top sides a lot of trouble, especially at home, like you said. And, Chris Wood could have had a second goal if it wasn't for the fact that he was marginally offside. But Gary O'Neill was actually fuming with one of the decisions that went against his side, which was a Chris Wood handball from a free kick. Did you see it, Tobes? What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think all of the decisions in this game were right. I think the free kick was fine. There were two penalty shouts as well, one for Forest, which I don't think was a penalty, and another for Wolves, which again I don't think was a penalty. So I think in this game, yeah, for me, all of the decisions were right. I think it was a good refereeing performance. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I do like the fact that they've definitely brought in ball to hand, because that just seemed like a rule they decided to brush away last season. So much very glad it's been brought back. But we can't not move on until we talk about that Bellegarde goal, the one from distance. Yeah, it was a really poor clearance from Ibrahima Sangare, but Bellegarde, you just don't expect a player in this day and age, when they're coached so much to pass it and play it and try and find the most optimum angle to find a shot, but he just takes the first time, and it is an absolutely splendid goal. And as yourself a striker, you must have been delighted when you saw that.
Oh yeah, it was lovely. It was a nice little bit of knuckle as well, which I think it means the keeper can't dive too early. They have to wait, and the speed that he's hit it at, there's just no chance for the keeper to react anyway. So yeah, literally a perfect hit. Really, really nice strike, and someone who's sort of come up too much. So I think after that goal, he's maybe going to keep his place in the side, and yeah, he'll be definitely hoping for a few more of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you got the likes of Strand Larsen, Huang Cunha as well, he really needs to be taking those chances, because, there's going to be a lot of competition this 4 days for Wolves going forward. But they look like another side who've, after the big defeat to Chelsea last week, that to get a 1-1 draw against Nottingham Forest away, it's not the end of the world, and it's actually a pretty good result. Which brings on to the final game of the game week, which was Ipswich Town 1, Fulham 1, and Ipswich Town finally getting their first point of the season. I did say last week that with the first game being Liverpool and then the second game being Man City, that the season really starts at home against Fulham, and they're able to get a good point.
Yeah, and I think they played really well. I think we saw some good moments against Liverpool, and that I think a lot of people were saying how well they played despite how difficult the game is on paper especially. And I think in this game we saw some really good moments again from Ipswich, and they fully deserved the point. And their goal coming from Davis at left back, who last season was exceptional, got a really large number of assists, and I think the way he created this goal was so positive to see. Burst forward, took it past about 3 players, I think, without much reaction. They weren't able to do much because his movement was so good. Played it into Delap, and a really nice finish from 20 yards just outside the box. And I think that's definitely 2 of their best players in Davis and Delap, and 2 players that, if they step up, they're going to be able to pick up points this season, as they did this weekend.
Yeah, and I think it was really important that Liam Delap ended up getting a goal in this game, because when you buy in a striker who you're going to be relying on to get you a lot of the goals in the season as a newly promoted side, you want to make sure your striker gets off to a good start. And yeah, I think him getting the goal in this game, I think his all-round play was really good as well. He really gave the Fulham centre-backs a handful in this one, and it shows that, he is Premier League quality, because you probably think that, but it's nice to be able to prove it to yourself and everyone else around you as well. So I was very impressed with Delap in this game. And to be fair, I'm impressed with Fulham as well, because despite the fact that I thought that they didn't create too much, they were still able to get a draw in this game. And this time it was Adama Traore, who, is very 50-50 whether he has a good or a bad game. But In this one, I did think he was causing Ipswich some trouble, and then he was able to get a goal in the 32nd minute of the game where, again, another left back, this time for Fulham, Anthony Robinson, bombing down the left-hand side, and he's able to pull it back to Traore, who, despite the fact that Ipswich had 4 or 5 defenders back in the box, they're all running back into position, ball watching slightly, and no one was able to see that there was only one man in the box. It was Traore, and he was able to put a lovely finish past the goalkeeper. So, one which I think Ipswich would be disappointed with, but I think Fulham getting a point, they'll take that probably, won't they?
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad point. I think when it comes against a newly promoted side, it might be a little bit disappointing for Fulham, especially with, I think, maybe their sort of goal for the season, I think, is to really sort of step away from a potential relegation fight, really. But yeah, I think the way that Ipswich played, I think a point is deserved as well, and I don't think Fulham could have expected more. But maybe before the game, Fulham would have hoped to have been a little bit more adventurous with obviously Smith Rowe and Iwobi and Adama, but they combined really well and got a goal, and yeah, take the point.
Yeah, absolutely. And there we have it. That is all 10 games from Game Week 3 in the Premier League, all done and dusted, and it is now time for the first international break. But don't worry, we will be here next week as well. We're not sure what we're going to do yet, but we will be there with content to keep you happy and excited during the lack of Premier League football. So if you want to stay in touch with us, then make sure to subscribe and like us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and if you're listening to us on Spotify, give us 5 stars, answer our questionnaire, tell a friend, because we're here every week from now till the end of the Premier League season. Toby, thank you very much, and everyone for watching, thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you in the next one.